And now we are ready to do some kind of development project. We already have a Hello World application. And now we will try to implement the next traditional program for novice developers, a calculator. As a result, we will get a network client-server application with a graphical user interface localized into Russian language. So we can find the code of this project on GitHub. GitHub and, for example, GitLab supports hosting for software development and version control with Git version control system. Version control, also known as revision control, source control, and source code management, is a class of systems for managing changes to computer programs, the documents, large websites, or other collections of information. Version control is a component of software configuration management. The first generation VCS were intended to track changes for individual files, and checked out files could only be edited locally by one user at a time. They were built on the assumption that all users would log into the same shared Unix host with their own accounts. The second generation VCS introduced networking, which led to centralized repositories that contained the official versions of their projects. This was good progress since it allowed multiple users to check out and work with the code at the same time, but they would all be committed back to the single point of failure, the central repository. Furthermore, network access was required to make commits. The third generation is distributed VCS. In distributed VCS, all copies of the repository are created equal. Generally, there is no central copy of the repository. This opens the path for commits, branches, and merges to be created locally without network access and pushed to other repositories as needed. There are many VCS systems developed and used on Unix-like systems, SCCS, RCS, CVS, SVN, Mercurial, Bazaar, etc. And Git is now the most popular. Git is a distributed version control system for tracking changes in source code during software development. It was created by Linus Torvalds in 2005 for development of the Linux kernel. So the basic tool for working with the Git repositories is the Git utility. First, we have to clone our repository. Okay, we now have our own local copy. Let's go inside. Now, let's take a look at the tags that indicate different stages of development. And let's move on to the initial stage now. As we can see, most of the files have disappeared, and now we only have a README and a makefile. So let's take a look at the README. We can see only description of first example. And the makefile. A makefile is a file containing a set of directives used by a make utility build automation tool to generate a target goal. Make is the oldest and most widely used dependency tracking tool for building software projects. It is used to build large projects such as the Linux kernel with tens of millions of source code lines. Usually using make is pretty simple. You just run make with no arguments. In this case, utility tries to find a make file that starts with a lowercase letter and then with a capital letter. Usually the make file with uppercase letter is placed in the project. The lowercase version is often used for some local changes while testing and customizing the make file of an upstream project. The make file format is pretty simple. It's just a lot of rules for building projects. In the first position, we see the target. After the semicolon, dependencies can be placed, which are just other targets. Lines following the description of targets and dependencies, which start with the tab character, the commands that must be executed to complete this target. If the dependencies are files, make checks the modification times of those files and recursively rebuilds those changed dependency targets. The current make file just includes a few targets for working with the Git repository. The first will start by default. If we want to run another target, we must pass it as a parameter when running the make utility.